were made possible, because of this outdoor mobility of the transistor radio. Yet, the hitherto unknown all availability or disposability of a medium like the transistor, which I argue inaugurated the era of postmodern media usages, also generated, at least in the case of the French singer Frankie Jourdan and the British comedian Benny Hill, some humoristic and ironic reactions. In their 1961 songs, both called Transistor Radio, they complained about their girlfriends being addicted to their transistors and therefore resistant to the courtship of their ardent worshippers. Let's first listen to Frankie Jourdan and then to the slightly comic version of Alfred Hawthorne Hill, alias Benny Hill. I couldn't find references if they somehow copied from each other, but they are so close in both the lyrics and a bit also the melody that I think that there is kind of copying going on.
Il fait chaud ou froid, quand je veux la prendre dans mes bras, quand je veux la serrer contre moi, il y a toujours quelque chose qui ne va pas. Quand elle sort son transistor, c'est devenu une folie. Il n'y a plus que ça dans sa vie, elle n'a plus qu'un feu la nuit. Même le soir quand elle s'endort, elle garde son transistor.
That is of course a serious problem for a relationship. So, Benny Hill tells us quite similar story.
Mom, baby's got a transistor radio. She takes it everywhere we go. She takes it when we go out walking, even to a movie show. But just last night in the pale moonlight, I asked her for a kiss. But instead of hearing her whisper sweet words of love, all that I could hear was this.
Goes on by saying, I'd like to take a transistor radio and throw it in the blue sea. I'm so jealous of the transistor radio because it takes her mind off me. Instead of being jealous, Buck Owens, who started his career as a country singer under the name, band name of Buck Owens and his Buckaroos, fell in love with the beautiful girl made in Japan. In his love declaration, Made in Japan from 1972, he confessed. The dance floor is open.
My transistor radio comes from far away. Over here, over there, it's breaking day. I remember all the good times I had walking in the sand with the beautiful girl that I met in Japan. The beauty of her face was beyond my wildest dreams. Cherry blossoms moving in the mountain in the early spring. As we walked by the river and she softly took hold of my hand, that's when I fell deep in love with the girl made in Japan.
Well, Buck Owens fell in love with this girl made in Japan. But the American radio industry became the victim of these girls made in Japan, and in the 60s, more or less, there were American radio industry got bankrupt and was flooded with cheap transistor radios from Japan. Both the transistor songs from Benny Hill and Frankie Jordan and Buck Owens' Love Declaration Made in Japan witness of the intimate relationship that people established with the transistor radio. A relationship that, at least in some cases, functioned as an emotional prosthesis. Because of this closeness, both in a physical and psychological sense, the transistor probably evokes such strong feelings of technostalgia. The technostalgic memories couched in the various song lyrics and emotionally amplified by the music are a perfect example of communicated memorial practice, negotiating past and present, private and public, individual and collective experiences with a memory technology. None of the numerous works on the 60s as the crucial decade of cultural modernization and youth rebellion misses to give the transistor radio special credits as a juvenile status symbol and mediator of Americanization and modern lifestyle. Although, as stated in the beginning, historical research on the transistor as cultural phenomenon is rather poor, no one contests the importance of the transistor as an agent of intercultural transfer and crucial electronic consumption good in the emerging popular music subcultures of the post-war years. Numerous songs do witness of the transistor radio as a central actor in this emerging juvenile music subcultures and as a nodal point of leisure time activities. In the song of the French rock and roll legend Johnny Hallyday, nicknamed the French Elvis, whose title La Croisière des Souvenirs, so the Cruise of Souvenirs in 1977, already indicates the nostalgic temper of the tune. Hallyday sings about the good old times when transistor radios, cigarettes, and other juvenile accessoires created a feeling of freedom and independence. In a similar but somehow romanticized mood, the Greek Schlager star Vicky Leandros, famous for her melodramatic ballads and sloppy love songs, sings about the transistor in Die Souvenirs von damals, or Souvenirs 1998, triggering memories of the first love letters written at the delicate age of 15. Two of the earliest examples of transistor songs I could discover are Chuck Berry's Oh Baby Doll from 1957 and Freddie Boom Boom Cannon, She Is My Transistor Sister from 1960. These two earliest examples can be interpreted as contemporary sketches of a juvenile lifestyle dominated by rock and roll music, dancing and sex appeal. Chuck Berry remembers the moments of unexpected freedom because of a teacher leaving the classroom. I quote, "When the teacher was gone, that's when we had a ball. We used to dance and play up and down the hall. We had a portable transistor radio." Cannon's song, She's My Transistor Sister, is a love poem dedicated to the irresistible transistor radio.
She's my transistor sister. I was the radio under her arm. But no one can resist her. Oh, she's more with a musical charm. I had the present hair and it's response and it's back and funny and all the time. She's my transistor sister. With her radio, yeah. Now early in the morning to late at night. She's a tune with all over DJs.
Evidence for the fact that the transistor was a highly appreciated consumption good for teenagers is given by numerous songs referring to the unforgettable moment of buying or receiving a transistor set. For example, as a Christmas or birthday gift. In The Tiny Blue Transistor Radio from 1964, country singer Bill Anderson enthusiastically recalls the day he got his first transistor radio. Quote, "For my birthday just a year ago." While the American singer and parodist Alan Sherman was happy to list the Japanese transistor radio at the top of his gift pack in his 1964 parody of the Christmassy consumption called The 12 Days of Christmas, Buck Owens still needed to put on his wishing list for Santa Claus in 1968 the transistor radio in the song "One of Everything You Got." Sherman's parody of the popular Christmas standard, whose origins as a song go back to the 13th century, is interesting because it refers to an old and well-known Christian folk carol. His ironic adaptation of the song catapults a capitalist status symbol, the transistor radio, into a theological frame of reference. Both the verse structure of the lyrics and the melodic composition, based on the cyclic repetition of the opening theme, reinforce the status of the transistor radio as the first and most important gift. The transistor is further accentuated by the fact that all the other gifts rather represent useless gadgets than precious presents. Although there is still some academic speculation about the original meaning of, you can see it probably here, of the partridge in a pear tree as a first gift in the traditional song. A certain consensus reigns among scholars that partridge was often used as an emblem for the evil, and that pear tree symbolizes female fertility. So, in a somewhat adventurous and speculative interpretation of Sherman's parodist adaptation, one could identify the transistor radio as an emblem of the modern consumer society, as symbol of an ambivalent object of desire, embodying both the temptation and danger of rock and roll music with its strong sexual and racial connotations.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a Japanese transistor radio. On the second day of Christmas, my true love gave to me green polka dot pajamas and a Japanese transistor radio. It's a Nakashima. On the third day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a calendar book with the name of my insurance man and a Japanese transistor radio. It's the Mark IV model. That's the one that's discontinued. On the fourth day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a simulated alligator wallet. Calendar book with the name of my insurance man and a Japanese transistor radio. It comes in a leatherette case with holes in it, so you can listen right through the case. A statue of a lady with a clock where her stomach ought to be. On one end that you can stick in your ear, and a thing on the other end that you can't stick anywhere because it's bent. A hammered aluminum nutcracker, and all that other stuff. And a Japanese transistor radio. On the seventh day of Christmas, like a pink satin pillow that says San Diego with fringe all around it, and all that other stuff. And a Japanese transistor radio.
Well, it goes on and goes on until the 12th day. So I stop here. Being the address of love poems and the most wanted Christmas gift, the transistor radio had its enemies too. It was, while praised as a triumph of modern technology by some, it was criticized or condemned as a public nuisance by others. Not all contemporaries of the transistor had warm feelings about the effects of this mobile radio in public spaces. Some experienced it as a source of noise and acoustic pollution of the environment. The earliest example for this kind of category of memories, of kind of critical social or political memories, could be detected in a song of the Dutch songwriter Jules de Korte, who in around 1962 wrote a song called Draagbare Radio's, Portable Radios, where he criticizes the negative social and cultural impacts of this new wonder of our times. I won't play that because the music is so horrible, but I will give you the quotes and translate it. The new wonder of our time, portable radios, spread over cities and over the countryside, caused some troubles. Portable radios in the bus and in the train, why do they have to make such a noise? Oh my God, maybe I'm too conservative, because it causes me so much trouble. From here to there, here to here, portable radios peeping like a mouse, brutal and noisy. I would prefer to stay at home if I only could. Portable radios all along the road, what will it be in the future? Boys and girls, what a gadget. Soon the whole world will be flooded by transistor radios. Portable radios on the beach and on the fields. No, 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 this is one miniature too much. Jules de Korte was a blind singer, so maybe he was especially sensitive to all the noises that these transistor radio produced in the public sphere. In a similar critical tone, the French chansonnier Dalida, in her song Baisse un peu la radio, Turn Down Your Radio from 1966, and Pierre Perret, il y a 50 ans, il y a 50 gosses dans l'escalier, 50 guys on the stairs in 1981, complained about the constant domestic noise of transistor radios. And George Harrison's Devil's Radio from 1987 sharply condemns the radio as gossip dissemination machine. So all these songs and texts agree on their critique of the transistor radio as an irritating noise factor disturbing the peaceful, or at least acoustically peaceful, social environment. Well, as you can imagine, I could go on for this, or like this forever, no, not forever, but at least for another few hours, making you listening to a lot of interesting songs. But I think it's time to conclude with some remarks on a topic I shortly touched in the introduction of this lecture, that is the question of technostalgia and melancholia. Technostalgia seems to be hip. When I look at the term, more than 500,000 entries popped up in less than a second. Most of them refer to blogs where amateur collectors of truck accessoires, early computer games, or adult fans of model railways act out their nostalgic passion for yesterday's technologies. Asked why they had named their first album Technostalgia in 2001, T-Minus frontman Troy Thompson replied, I quote, "The emotional aspect of music to me is almost supreme, and a common emotion I feel from making music is nostalgia." The album was created using technology that wasn't around for normal Joes like me 5 or 10 years ago. But the words technology and nostalgia together, put the words technology and nostalgia together, and you get technostalgia. I like the irony. While the term technostalgia implicates a kind of bittersweet longing for the past that can, at least in a mediated way, be re-experienced or relived by the use of digitized copies of, for example, these songs on the internet. A lot of transistor songs are expressions of a musing reflection or contemplation of the past. In this sense, they could, I think, better be characterized as techno-melancholic hymns to the transistor radio, paying a sonic and lyric tribute to the memory of the transistor. As I mentioned at the beginning of my lecture, transistor memory set to music can be described as communicative memory practices, referring to the transistor as a technical artifact, as a social medium, and as a cultural status symbol. The many references to the transistor radio in these popular music songs bear witness to the transistor's living memory and reflect an ongoing process of intellectual appropriation, both as a technology and as a medium. The songs reflect the process of lyrical and sonic digestion of actual or remembered interactions with the transistor, and thereby seem to support Jérôme Baudon's thesis or findings mentioned at the beginning of this lecture. Remembering the transistor is by no means synonymous with remembering radio listening. What is remembered is not only programs or content, like music, but concrete interactions with this object in specific contexts and situations of use. It seems as though the technostalgic and techno-melancholic memories are specifically connected to the transistor's closeness to the listener's body. It is this bodily and sensorial experience of a technology and a technology of memory that brings me to a final point of reflection, dealing with the nostalgic and melancholic quality of memories. It seems as though the wave of digitized cultural heritage that has flooded the internet over the last decade has triggered off a nostalgic boom that has infected contemporary low and high culture in a similar way. While some interpret this misty-eyed longing for a past that is no longer there as a kind of psychological defense mechanism of the individual trying to come to terms with the ever-increasing speed of technological and social change in a globalized world, Svetlana Boym argues that there is another form of nostalgia, which she calls reflexive nostalgia, that can be interpreted as a form of contemporary critique of society. Just as modernity as a concept has been used by Baudelaire to criticize the process of industrialization and modernization, she argues, reflexive nostalgia can be understood as a form of popular criticism of globalization. In other words, if modernity is about becoming a critical observer of the process of modernization, then reflexive nostalgia means taking a critical stance towards the contemporary speed dating culture in science and social life. Although I sympathize with Boym's ideas of reflexive nostalgia as a kind of critical intellectual attitude, the example of the mediated memories of the transistor inspired me to think that we rather witness a phenomenon that I would tentatively like to describe as analogue melancholia. While nostalgia, both as a term and a concept, was invented in the 17th century by the Swiss physician Johannes Hofer to describe a condition afflicting Swiss mercenaries on long tours of military duty, so it literally meant homesickness. Melancholy was interpreted as a psychological or emotional symptom of that disease. So in a modern and demedicalized sense, nostalgia is an incurable phenomenon, as the only remedy would involve time travel. Melancholia instead expresses the emotional and intellectual struggle to come to terms with a present that becomes a foreign country, to play with David Levinthal's famous formulation of the past as a foreign country. The losses of the past are indeed irreversible, despite the fact that we become victims of our ever-increasing capacity to store and share vast amounts of cultural data. According to the historian Peter Fritsche, this simultaneity of our experience and evidence of loss, and the sharing of an ever-increasing historical knowledge about these losses constitutes what he calls the melancholy of history itself. The melancholy of history contains both these meanings, the sorrowful note of testimony and the sympathetic ear of the listener, and the organization of occurrences as so much change, wreckage, and loss. In line with Fritsche's thoughts, I think that what a lot of people are longing for today is not the impossible return to a past which is always seen through rose-colored glasses. One can rather observe a kind of melancholic retrospection of our analog past. This melancholic retrospection might, on the one hand, be the result of a generational gap between the analog and the digital born. So I guess that the loss of an object like the transistor radio is most probably experienced only by people of the so-called baby boom generation, and it is unlikely to produce nostalgic feelings of contemporary youngsters. On the other hand, it might be the product of a tension between the loss or stealthy disappearance of the material evidence of analog technologies in our daily life, and at the same time the massive resurrection of analog-born products in digital technologies and the internet. While the generation gap between analog and digital born is basically a demographic and therefore temporary delimited problem, the stealthy disappearance of material evidence of analog memory technologies, I think, constitutes a specific challenge for cultural heritage institutions such as museums and archives. As media scholars, we should make sure that the material traces of these memory machines won't disappear from the digital radar. I think Google being the most powerful of these radars. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not taking a reactionary or conservative stance against the wonderful possibilities of new technologies, digital technologies, and what they offer for digital humanities. Far from that. As you might know, I myself, and Thibaut mentioned it in the introduction, involved in several European projects building audiovisual archives online and using these wonderful possibilities also for kind of new scholarly perspective towards our past. But I'm on the other hand analog born and historian enough to be aware of the danger of sacrificing the material cultural heritage of old media and memory technologies. Sure, without the digitization of songs and the online availability of millions of song lyrics in the internet, my research, this research on transistor memories, sample music would hardly be possible. Yet, as media historians, media archaeologists, or media scholars in general, we need the material traces of analog memory technologies, not only as physical witnesses or proofs of a period gone by, but as objects that can enlighten or educate our own analytical skills when it comes to the study of past usages of memory technologies. And this is not only true for the transistor radio, but of course for the cameras and films, projectors, and all other kind of technologies. A pure focus on mediated memories, or memory texts, bears the danger of a reductionist perspective on memory technologies, reducing the historical evidence of things to their textual tradition. Of course, I'm aware of the fact that the display, for example, of physical objects in a museum does not offer direct or unmediated access to these things. The staging of a transistor radio in a museum of broadcasting or industrial design is of course influenced by the narrative and aesthetic frame in which it is presented. The visual gaze offered to a visitor of a museum is very often that of a highly aestheticized view, and things or objects are staged as masterpieces, even in museums of science and technology. Yet the aura of the original, which museums try to stage, is of course a fake one. The aura, at least in the sense of Benjamin, is destroyed from the very moment on when an object is detached from its original environment. And it is exactly because of this inevitable loss of aura that museums try to create a new narrative framework aiming at staging a mediated experience of that aura. Despite this paradox, what I call paradox of mediated auratic experiences in museums, I nevertheless want to end this lecture with a plea for a hands-on, ears-on, all senses on, or integral sensual approach towards media and memory technologies. As the French philosopher Michel Serres so brilliantly analyzed in his book The Five Senses, La philosophie des corps mêlés, we need the second tongue in order to grasp the complex meaning of things. Using the example of wine tasting, Serres shows that our analytical approach towards things, even to such highly sensitive things as wine, is dominated by our first tongue, the tongue of language, speech, and words. This first tongue constantly rules out the analytical skills of our second tongue, the tongue that tastes, that explores, and that keeps silent. Sapidity sleeps in the narcosis of words, he says. This linguistic anesthesia dispossesses people of their aesthetic sensation. In order to revitalize this aesthetic quality of things, even of things like the transistor radio, we need our second tongue, that is, all our senses. We have listened to transistor songs from the 50s to the 60s, to the 90s in a high-tech environment with stereo speakers of I don't know how many watts. But listening to the same songs on a 1950s transistor radio, tuned on a medium wave station transmitting from a few hundred kilometers away, has been, believe me or not, a completely different sonic experience. And doing it under the pillow while lying in bed or driving on a Vespa, well, I guess you can see the point that I want to make. The transistor songs have confronted us with the rich sensorial and emotional qualities that the use of this memory machine has triggered. Taking these memories seriously would mean that we as scholars interested in the meaning of these memories, should not only try to re-experience the mediated content by listening or looking at these objects and songs, but that we should, if possible, try to reenact usages by doing hands-on experiences with these material traces. This would keep the material memories of memory technologies alive and probably cure some nostalgic longings by analog-born scholars as well. Thank you very much for your attention.